You're welcome to the Center for International Development's Friday Speaker Series. I am Enita Okediji, a mid-career master's in public administration student here at the Harvard Kennedy School. And I really look forward to today's discussion on reasons why development projects fail while others succeed. It's always sparked my curiosity, having worked in development space for a while on bilateral development projects, including GFID, now NCDU and USAID, why some of these projects fail in some cases and succeed in others. And I'm very interested in learning more perspectives from our guest speaker present here today. So this session will expose us into the mechanisms of development processes and into the lives of the people our speaker encountered during her work in Somalia. The format for today's session is a 35-minute presentation and around 20 minutes for question and answer. So before we get started, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. Given that this is a hybrid event, we would be asking questions from both in-person audience here and also virtually. I will be working around with a mic for the in-person questions, and Claire here at the back would ask questions from the virtual audience. We're also going to record today's session, but we'll keep the camera on the speaker only to ensure that voices from the audience can also be recorded, but not the video. So it's a video event and it will be available on CID YouTube video channel afterwards. Please use the QR codes located around the room to check today's into today's event. I can see one QR code over there. Where? Yeah, so you can check into today's event using the QR code right there, and it will help the CID track team attendance and cater for future events for the audience. Please make sure to subscribe to CID's newsletter to learn more about our event offerings and opportunities weekly. Without further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce our speaker for today, Valeria Saggiomo. She's an academic in the field of international cooperation for development with 20 years experience in Africa as a development worker and evaluation consultant. She consults for prominent NGOs and International Organization for Immigration, for Migration, and for Evaluation Office of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. She's a visiting scholar here at the Center for International Development at the Harvard Kennedy School. Thank you all for being here. Valeria, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. So, some 20 years ago, I got my master in international development, as you will probably do shortly, and I was ready to leave my comfort zone in Italy and move to Somalia to work in the education sector. Let's see. Claire, I need your help. Doesn't work. Oh. Yeah, this one. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. So at that time, 20 years ago, the strong narrative of development was the one of the Millennium Development Goals, a set of objectives to boost the attainment of basic human rights for every child in the world, and especially in poor countries. The idea was that eliminating poverty was possible. It only required a strong political will by rich countries and external support through international aid and a governance capacity of poor countries to build their economy and welfare systems to guarantee human rights. This narrative is today more or less the same, with few adjustments with the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. So in 2003, I became a project manager for an NGO in the fact that education was key to development I dedicated 4 years to promote primary and secondary education in remote villages in South Central Somalia, in conflict zones, in emergency conditions, especially in 2006, when the Union of Islamic Courts took the power in much of the country. In this period, I lost many of the certainties I had about development before leaving. I realized that international plan for eliminating poverty was far from what the reality in the field was like. Governance capacity was at stake in Somalia, in southern Sudan, and later became fragile also in Kenya, despite the support of international community. And the support of international community itself was far from being neutral, especially in the education sector. Just think about the role of languages, teaching in Somali language or in Arabic language, and how this may impact on the future identity of the nation. And I realized that local actors, Islamic courts, local communities, schools, mosques, who were framed as beneficiaries of international aid intervention, often in a passive way, were on the contrary, the main actors that wrestled to find their way out of their development problems. For many reasons that we will soon touch in the presentation, many projects promoted by international aid did fail in achieving the objectives they were designed to achieve. Empty schools in pastoral areas, low presence of girls in primary and secondary education, and the growing political instability that made even going to school a life-threatening activity for a child, as it is today in Mogadishu and in many parts of the world. The colleagues that preceded me in this PID private speech shared with us more or less the same story. We have here the women still struggling to go to toilet safely in refugee camps without fearing sexual harassment. We have heard of that lack of data on the impact of women, on the impact of policies on women still represent an obstacle to women inclusion. And I must admit that in 22 decades that I have worked in this field, we're still struggling with the same problem and promoting the same solution. Why? Why does aid fail to achieve its objectives? Big question. Now, literature on aid effectiveness explains project failure as a consequence of poor problem identification. This is what the PDIA approach also criticizes. And I completely agree with you. If you misunderstand the problem to address, all the planning phase is compromised, as well as the likelihood to generate significant impact on the life of people through international cooperation. Poor planning. The success of a project depends on properly defining in detail the objectives to achieve and the strategy to achieve the objectives, the steps required, the time frame, the resources, the competencies of the team that needs to implement the strategy. So according to prevailing literature, success depends on all these aspects and how well they are planned. As a result, international cooperation tends to overplan, to detail every single step in the path that goes from the problem to the solution, to fully control the outcome and ensure results. This is the result-based management approach and the theory that, however, often produces rigid rules to follow to ensure the attainment of objectives. And objectives themselves are evaluated exactly in relation to the adherence of the reality in the field to the plan. Unfortunately, the reality in the field, especially in conflict zones, in conflict areas, is so volatile and depends on so many variables that no plan will ever sufficiently. What happens, therefore, is to adapt the reality to the plan to escape the shame of project failure. And this creates vicious circles that do not favor aid effectiveness. And we could go on forever in identifying external and internal causes of failure of development projects, changes in political settings, natural disasters, poor control over project activities, inconsistent resources, lack of accountability, lack of transparency, but in synthesis, all these causes of failure lead to the same result, which is more planning plus some flexibility to adapt to the changing context. Having said that, I must add that there is a tendency in international cooperation to take distance from rigid approaches, from rigid plans, from linear, approaches, to embrace uncertainty and flexibility, and to support local dynamics leading to positive change, as the doing developing differently approach indicates. But despite this progress in the theory of international cooperation, and to a lesser extent in its practice, we still hardly explain why a lot of technically sound projects do fail, while others that may be poorly planned and under-resourced succeed in producing positive impact on the lives of people in poor countries. Good planning may not be the key to project success. So what is it? What is the determinant of project success? So in search of possible answers to this big question, I went back to study and I did a PhD to understand Islamic aid, and later the aid promoted by migrants, by diaspora organizations in their origin countries. And I saw other forms of modernity, as Professor Woolcock would say, and other ways of doing development differently from the way international cooperation usually does. Obviously, I don't have a solution, don't expect it, but this afternoon I will share with you my thoughts on the determinants of development project success, and I want your feedback at the end of the presentation. So in the next 10 minutes, I will bring you with me on a journey, through a journey to Somalia, to visit a development project promoted by a diaspora organization, by a migrant in his origin country. I chose diasporas as development actors because their way to do development is different. Their social activism is full of sentiment of love. Love for the motherland that was abandoned many years before. Love for those who were left behind. Love for the lost origins. Love for the happy childhood. For the smell of the house, the singing of mothers and women. And I'm sure you can understand this love very well, don't you? Who among you lives today in a country other than your country of origin? Who is a migrant or has been a migrant for a while? Raise your hands. Many of you. Many of you. And do you miss home? Have you ever felt nostalgic for the flavors, the colors of the streets, the gestures of the people? Have you ever suffered from that feeling of love that binds you to your motherland? I guess so. Now imagine that this love is the same feeling that drives the social activism of diasporas for their country. It's a form of return, and it's powerful, this vision. So I will tell you a story about this love, about diaspora's passion and dedication to their country of origin. It's an emblematic story. It's quite common among diaspora people. And it's a story where the main character is called to embark on a journey to overcome thousands of difficulties. And in the end, he will mature as a person and will be able to understand what matters in life and how to achieve true happiness through returning to his homeland. It's a success story. And I ask you to listen carefully and tell me what are the key factors that lead to its success. Ready? So this is the story of a young boy named Ahmed, who was born in Somalia in the 60s, just after the independence from the Italian colony. And when Siad Barre's regime became repressive in the 80s, Ahmed was a young old. He was clever, ambitious, and he decided to leave his country in search of a place to make his dreams come true. Yes. So after a long journey, Ahmed settled in Germany, where, thanks to a scholarship, he enrolled in the Faculty of Medicine and became a doctor. He also became an activist and learned how to mobilize students for social campaigns. He got married to a German lady, they had children, and lived together happily. At this point in his life, Ahmed had achieved all his life objectives, but something was missing. He felt the need to give back his fortune and his talent to his country of origin. And after 25 years, in 2005, he decided to return to Somalia, traveling the country to see how it could be of use in the medical field. He visited all hospitals in northwest of the country and judged them to be adequate for the needs of the population. The infrastructure could be improved, but it was not too bad. The expertise existed, and people were getting adequate care. There was only one area of public health, however, that struck Dr. Ahmed for his backwardness, and that was mental health. In the country's few psychiatric hospitals, patients were bound in chains, held like convicts, and relegated to solitary confinement like criminals, and deprived of the most basic medical care. In most cases, patients were confined to their homes and hidden from public eyes or abandoned by their families, wandering homeless and living on charity. Dr. Ahmed became convinced that this sector of public health in Somaliland needed to be improved. And rather than starting by rehabilitating the mental health department in Hargeisa Hospital, he thought it more straightforward to start from scratch and establish a mental health hospital in Muro, the Mandai Hospital. And this is when the adventure really began. So let's go and see how he organized himself to do that. He returned to Germany, where he began building a network of friends and colleagues who supported the initiative, involving in the project anyone who could offer resources, whether human, intellectual, material, or economic. To manage this network, Dr. Ahmed funded an association which would act as a catalyst, as a repository for the bureaucratic aspects related to the establishment of the hospital. And gradually, Dr. Ahmed succeeded in pulling together Somali psychiatrists living in Denmark, another one living in Sweden, in Norway, partners from London, Oslo, Copenhagen joined the initiative and built the hospital, including the University of Copenhagen, which pioneered an online telemedical system in Burao, by virtue of which the hospital had been equipped with the necessary facility to connect to the internet and organize an innovative system of psychiatric consultation by diaspora. The Somali psychiatrists from the diaspora managed to make their skills and knowledge available to their country, contributing to the well-being of Somalis remaining in the homeland. And I myself witnessed the hospital's paramedical staff facilitating online care sessions and taking charge of treatment to be given to patients. I listened at patients expressing gratitude to doctors for receiving specialized care tailored to their needs. And the community of Burao that was initially suspicious about the project and learned little by little to appreciate the advantage of having a modern hospital, psychiatric hospital in their city. Many people were no longer wandering the street in despair, and as patients were improving, their illness was no longer a burden to the community. For this reason, the Burao business community raised money to provide a free permanent internet connection to connect Mandai Hospital. And some time ago, the Minister of Health in Somaliland, in recognition of the good work done by Dr. Ahmed and his network, decided to take responsibility for part of the hospital's expenses. And the hospital is now fully integrated into the national health system. So this is the real success story. Now, the question for you is, why did Dr. Ahmed succeed despite not having a clear plan from the beginning, despite being under-resourced, despite having brought in a project that was not participated in by the community since the beginning? So I will open the discussion and give me your feedback on that.
Ahmed would like to respond to it. Actually,
So I would say that the success is actually in numbers. When you find people that are interested in the same cause, when you found people who have had similar experiences, one person cannot change a country. But when you have maybe a group of 100 people, 150 who all have the same mindset, who all have that attachment to their countries of the past, then they'll definitely be able to achieve something and do something, because it's the catalyst, as you said. He wasn't able to do this on his own. The way he was able to succeed is by finding similar-minded people. And I think that's the beauty of migrants. We all have people who can relate to what we've been through, or relate to people we've seen back home. And I feel like a lot of students do come to the US to bring back that knowledge and that wisdom back home. So there are people who are willing to help.
Thank you very much.
exactly. Anyone else? Sure. Oh, would you like to respond to that first before he goes ahead to ask his question? Valeria?
Yes, I'd like them to
Respond
try to figure out why Dr. Ahmed succeeded.
Okay. Go ahead and ask the question.
My question is not gonna answer or gonna comment on that, but I was gonna ask, like, what type of incentives do you think the government needs to provide in order for the diaspora to come home? Because in some cases, let's say we migrated to the US or to another developed country, and when we want to return home, there are just no jobs available for diaspora to work in. So what incentives do you think is most feasible for this? Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have a Q&A session. So noted. And yes.
Okay.
So we're responding to this question. Why Dr. Ahmed?
I think he was a very charismatic guy with that was able to transmit his purpose to the others. So I think that was a key characteristic he had, and he was able to transmit this passion of helping.
So he was a leader.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
What's your name?
Montserrat.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Say your name and respond to the question.
Hi, my name is Peace. I think very similar to what the others have said is there was a genuine passion. I think related to what you were saying before you go to this slide, a connection to the land, to the people. There's a deep interest that superseded, his financial, I don't know,
Constraint.
yeah, constraints or even reward from doing the project. So there's something there about what was driving him to get the project done. I think the other thing is when I compare it to how aid normally works, there's almost one standard fits all. So we've figured out, I don't know, universal access to education, and then it's taken to a place to be delivered. But he had a genuine interest to do something, went on the ground to figure out what that something would be, and then like somebody else mentioned, then tried to bring in other partners to deliver on the mission. So I think those are the things that stood out for me in terms of why the project succeeded.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peace. So we have one more response to this question, and then we can move on to the next.
Hi, so I'm Leonardo. For me, I'm looking less at the individual. I'm looking more at the environmental conditions that allow him to thrive. Because sometimes you have good ideas that put in the right place, like they might plan. So I heard a sentence like recently that it's like farmers don't plant crops, they actually foster the environments to allow the crops to raise. So I think that he observed a difficulty, he observed a challenge. There were lots of people interested in that challenge. He fostered a seed in a very productive place, in a very productive environment. And through that, obviously, there was some individualistic leadership characteristics that allowed him that. But definitely, he worked with a problem that needed a solution. And people were on board with the solution that he put forward. And from the moment that the solution was independent from him, that for me is a great success. When other people that don't know you, don't care like where you came from, don't care about your name, but when they foster that, that for me is when I see that he succeeded.
Thank you very much, Leonardo. So thank you for your insights. I think we are more or less on the same line, and it will not be a surprise for you to hear that from my experience as development practitioner and as a researcher in the development field, for a project to be successful, to generate positive change, there has to be a strong motivational drive in whoever implements it. One that springs from people's deepest feelings of love, in this case, love for the motherland, feelings of gratitude for the destiny that allowed us to overcome difficulties and achieve fulfillment. The desire to give back to those who have been left behind, those who have been less fortunate. And finally, the desire for true happiness that comes only when one's own happiness is shared. So this element, which I call sentiment, is present in the story of Ahmed, as you also noticed, who realized that at a certain point in his life, to be truly happy, he had to share his good fortune and return to Somalia after 25 years. So there is this element, the second element, there has to be sharing, as you also noticed. There is no true success nor happiness that is not shared or with others or for others. And the key to sharing lies in relationships. Hence, the importance of relationships underlying the dynamics of success. Not only in development cooperation, also in our personal life. In sociological terms, we would speak of social capital, which is not a new concept, but it is still hardly conceptualized and included in development plans, in development cooperation. For Dr. Ahmed, as you said, the success of the project was due to the network he managed to build between Somali diaspora, Somali doctors in the diaspora, between local communities, between the patients, local authorities. Without this network, there would have been no success. And third element, there has to be know-how, of course. It is undeniable that a certain level of skill is essential to success. And development cooperation already emphasizes this. Almost all empowerment efforts of local actors are based on capacity building. The problem may be that development cooperation focuses almost exclusively on capacity building, neglecting other aspects that should accompany a development project if it is to be transformative, sustainable, and effective. So what insights can we derive from this? Those of us who are involved in international development and want to make a difference by promoting effective projects. And here is my message to take home, as you can see from the picture inside. I think the time has come to conceptualize development cooperation as the product of relational exchange between individuals, communities, local actors, institutions, rather than a tool for reaching a series of objectives through increasingly sophisticated design techniques. So relationship, not only plans, are at the core of development processes. Relationship among people, good relationship towards a common goal, make things happen, lead to positive change, as in the story you have listened today. My research here at Harvard aims at elaborating this theory of sentiment and at including sentiments in the evaluation of development projects at all stages. Ex ante, meaning before the project is approved, to have a measure of the level of engagement with the goal on the part of local actors, of the actors involved. In itinere, meaning during its implementation, to offer the possibility of correcting dangerous dynamics that can weaken feelings and undermine the likelihood of success. And ex post, meaning after the project, to understand the sustainability of the change generated by the project. So wish me good luck and help me with your comments and suggestions. But after this last slide, that is a quote from Dr. Ahmed that inspired all this work you have listened to. We were in Morale, and I asked the same question I asked you. What is the secret of the success of your project? And his answer came without hesitation. He said, you need a strong motivational drive requiring you to do something for your country you love deeply. And you need expertise in thinking about and managing the project. Then, of course, you need to know how to get others involved. So he said, sentiments, know-how, and sharing. The key ingredients of successful development projects. Thank you very much.